Dr. Gregory Jantz is a best-selling author of over 45 books and the founder of the Center A Place of Hope, voted a top 10 center for depression treatment in the U.S. As the pioneer of whole-person care, Dr. Jantz is known as the messenger of hope. Now the nation's expert on anxiety, depression, substance abuse, relationships, trauma, and PTSD, here is Dr. Gregory Jantz.
Hi, it's Dr. Greg Jantz. Welcome to Hope and Possibility. That's our foundation. 38 years at the center as the founder, A Place of Hope. Do you know 38 years is a long time to be focused on providing hope? Because when we have hope, we have possibilities for different futures. And this is all about creating different futures. A life that can be marked with joy, passion, and enthusiasm for our future. That's why I can say, I think my passion has grown with each year. Seeing lives change for good, and that's our byline. Lives changing for good keeps me motivated, keeps me passionate, and today we're deep into anxiety. Yep, still into anxiety. Our last podcast, we were covering generalized anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, social anxiety disorder. That's the big one right now, still is the big one, a social anxiety disorder. Isolation, confinement, shelter in place did nothing but harm our mental health. So many studies now that are out, easy to find them. We look at the negative effects of what this has done. And that's why we're in anxiety right now. Anxiety always means there's a physical component to it. That's right, a physical component. What's that look like? It means that my sleep could be disrupted. It means my heart sometimes may race. I may have headaches, aches, and pains. I'm overwhelmed at times just with digestive issues, but there's a physical component. It can vary. Lightheadedness, headaches, but anxiety will come out of the body in multiple different ways. So always keep that in mind. That's why it's different than worry. I can worry, did I wear the right thing today? Or did I worry about, did I say the right thing? And worry will dissipate, or worry will turn into anxiety, and you'll end up with the physical symptoms. All right. Chronic stress produces chronic anxiety. Chronic stress produces chronic anxiety, which produces usually some chronic health conditions and long-standing addiction issues. That's where we are. All right, let's talk about panic disorders. Have you ever heard of a panic disorder or seen a panic disorder? It's a terrible, terrible experience. I recall a gentleman that we had the privilege of working with was in the middle of the freeway heading towards downtown Seattle, in the middle lanes, and all of a sudden his heart started pounding and his eyesight went blurry, and it was that instant cold sweat that just came right out of him, and he was drenched in sweat, blurry vision, heart. He describes it, he felt like his heart was going to come out of his chest. It was pounding so much. He thought he was dying. He thought, for sure, I'm having a heart attack. And bless him, he tried his best, and he did eventually get his car over to the side. You know, how do you do that in traffic on Interstate 5 heading into Seattle? But he did get his car over somehow without incident and was on the side of the road. 10-15 minutes passed, and he realized, man, I'm still alive. I'm alive. and he was, as he tells his story, he was surprised to discover that he is alive, because he thought for sure this is a heart attack. But what he was having was a anxiety, or oftentimes just called a panic attack. So here you go. It's terrible. It will pass. It can feel like you're dying. It feels totally out of control, and it's a sudden. And I have a note here that remind me to share, but it's a sudden, unexpected episode of intense fear. A sudden and at times unexpected episode, because that's why we develop the fear of the fear. We become afraid of this ever happening before again, because it was so terrible. And so it's the fear of the fear that really enters in there. We know, too, that 5% is a rough estimate of Americans have experienced a panic attack at least sometime in their life. I'm going to guess last 2.5 years of chronic pandemic stress with the newfound anxiety virus, because that's what we have. We have an anxiety virus going on. Fear has a ripple effect, and fear replicates itself, much like a virus. So with this anxiety going on, I'm going to say I think the number is much, much higher. People who have experienced panic attacks, panic disorder, and there is an actual diagnosis for panic disorder. All right, sweating, shaking, the racing heart, the chest pain, difficulty breathing, even a dizziness, nauseousness, and that fear of totally losing control and dying. There are the symptoms right there of the panic attack. It's brutal. And I want to stress this because sometimes you're so ashamed if you ever had a panic attack or you feel like you've had a number of them. It's like, I feel like something's totally wrong with me. I feel totally out of control, and something must be terribly wrong. And so there can be shame associated with the fear. What is wrong with me? And we can jump to huge conclusions with that fear, like I must have a disease. There must be something in my body that is terribly wrong, and see, fear breeds fear. So just watch for that. By the way, a panic attack does pass in the time frame. I want to say 10-15 minutes is certainly the norm, but most people notice that within 10 minutes, maybe no greater than 12 minutes for most, that it's really diminished greatly. Once it hits that peak of intensity, it tends to go ahead and decrease, but it's still intense on the downside as well. All right, that's panic disorder. Yes, are there things we can do for it? There are some things we need to do to support the body physically. Let me just toss out one of the things that we do here, our medical team does, that can be quite calming. We want to calm the brain and calm the body. We will do, it's called a nutrient IV. Yes, it's an IV with nutrients, and we can put some calming amino acids and some nutrients that the doctors would decide that a person could benefit from. They do their blood work and they look at various indicators, and where there's a likely nutrient deficiencies, or the body could be, if you will, comforted by replacing and some amino acids and helping a calming effect. That's one of the things that we do to help, because you've got to rebuild and help the body get what it needs, because a panic attack is the body's response to really a lot of stored over time chronic stress, and it's there, and the body kind of takes over. That's why it's like I feel like I'm totally out of control, because the body takes over. All right, obsessive compulsive. I'm just going to move to the next one. Obsessive compulsive disorder. Obsessive, of course, is in mind. The compulsion is the behavior we do. And sometimes when we think of and it's a form of anxiety disorder, but when we think of this, we are thinking of things like door checking. A person that has OCD lays in bed, goes, did I lock the front door? I better go check. And they'll go check the lock, check the windows, go back and lay down. 5 minutes pass, the intensity of the thoughts are back. I better go check again. So it's the constant checking and rechecking. That's can be a common one, but obsessive compulsive disorder does come in other flavors, if you will. There is the person that could have a germ or fear of the viruses. And we did see this in the heat of the COVID pandemic. We would see people, grocery stores, fully geared up, and even going home. We worked with some clients who would have a table set up in their garage, and they would have their gloves and protective gear on, and would take each item out of the grocery sack, place it on the table, and then have a process for cleaning it, wiping down anything before it actually went into the house. And then, dropping all your clothes in the garage, putting on new clothes, washing, cleaning. So what happened was, and I'll be frank, now we found out that none of that at all was necessary, and COVID doesn't really pass through on surfaces. So there was a huge, really just a huge fear that was created. And if you've already struggled with obsessive compulsive thoughts, this was the perfect storm. So that would be a form. Let's give some of the defining characteristics. Compulsive activity meant to drive away the obsession. So that's the cleaning, that's checking the locks. Because there is, it's a short time, but there's like a temporary relief. And you go, oh, I feel better. And so that's why it, in a way, it's like it's addictive. I keep repeating the cycle. There are times where a person may feels like uncontrolled thoughts towards another person that are scary, like creating harm, or it's like intrusive thoughts. And this can fall under the category obsessive compulsive disorder as well. The OCD, certainly since the pandemic, and I'm mentioning this one today in our time together because it is one that we are seeing a lot more as people are coming in with fear that has them paralyzed, and anxiety disorder and social anxiety. We're seeing the obsessive compulsive disorder. It kind of fits right in there. And that can be so paralyzing. You end up kind of not wanting to go anywhere, touch anything. Things can't be clean enough. It is a powerful, let me say it, powerful struggle in the mind and thought. And it is one that can be, our doctors here may use medication, some of that IV nutrient therapy, even DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, obviously cognitive behavioral therapy. But also we want to get at what was the root cause that started this, because as you go through life, things like a pandemic and things can act as triggers to kind of bring it all back. And that's what's happened the last 2.5 years, what we've called pandemic. What's happened is a lot of perhaps mental health struggles or issues that you feel like, well, I'm pretty much over it, I'm doing pretty good. And the pandemic comes along, and it's as though it re-robs you of all of your progress, and you go, now things are worse than ever before. And that's where we're seeing a lot of folks. It feels worse than ever before. All right, let's just mention in our time remaining specific phobias. We think of agoraphobia, which is the fear of open spaces. When people were confined, isolated to home, sheltered in place, work from home, for some, that was a tipping point, and you go back out. I remember talking to a gentleman. He goes, man, I'm like got a mile away from my home, and I started to have panic the farther I got away from home, because the farther I got away from that anchoring place of home, the more anxious I became. So that was really common. Some people are still struggling with that. A phobia, simply put, is an irrational fear to a specific trigger. You could say, well, no, my fear of spiders is real. And there are healthy fears, by the way. But it's an exaggerated, intense response that can be triggered. If you were a person, a victim of abuse, and you had a abuser in your life, you could see somebody or hear a voice and go, that sounds just like the person that abused me. And it can act as a trigger. And so there can be a phobia even around a profile of a person, a type of person, the sound of a voice. So that's all in there as well. Alrighty. Some of the other common ones is claustrophobia. It could be a fear, a specific phobia. Let's see. Heights would be another real common. There are more elaborate ones, and we always have such fun names for them, like spiders. Fear of spiders is arachnophobia, which we hear about. So what we know is usually with a phobia, something did happen, and it transformed kind of the intense energy right on over into that specific phobia. So a lot of different ways that we attempt to cope with fears and phobias in our life and anxieties. Some of the most common, we can escape through even TV watching. Okay. By the way, through the pandemic, I saw a note that television watching is still up over 30%, averaging 41 hours of the television on a day. 41 hours? In a week? A week? Wow. See, so all that can be escapism. It'd be a way of self-medicating. People watch different things, but I guess if it's watching all the different news options, that maybe it's not self-medicating, but if you escape through different movies and so forth, maybe that's self-medicating. All right. Twice as much time has been now is online than ever before. We did the work from home. We did school from home, virtual learning. Virtual learning did not work. Our kids in 2021 had the highest academic failure ever on record, so that's important to know. Kids would be on their Surface or on the screen, supposedly plugged into the classroom. The teacher's doing the best that the teacher can, and then the kids have their cell phones and they're playing online games with their classmates who are in class online with them. You wouldn't believe how often we got these kinds of stories. Drinking alcohol while people were working. So work from home. I spoke with a HR representative from a very, very big high-tech firm in the greater Seattle area. And this person shared with me that, hey, work from home didn't really work very well. We can't supervise, we can't manage, and people's productivity did not go up, it went down. And we did have, according to my conversation with this person, individuals who would start drinking at 1 p.m. while they're working, and so their work day would be, they'd be drinking half the work day. So, all right. Our 12 to 17-year-olds really, through the pandemic, created a whole other set of issues and fears and failure. They didn't have all the normal graduations, birthday parties for kids. Nothing was normal, and the milestones that you would normally have, he didn't really have. So I'm just sharing this because we need to understand that this affected us all, and it helps us understand what has happened with anxiety levels as they are high then, high now. I don't even know, can we say we're post-pandemic? But now we're seeing the effects of everything that we did during the pandemic, and people connecting digitally, digital relationships did not produce calmness. The more time people were online, the higher their anxiety symptoms. So anxiety, depression, we haven't really, but they can go and do go hand in hand. So the social distancing, the flattening the curve, I wrote down all the things we did. Shelter in place. We had essential versus non-essential. We see each other now. Do we shake hands? That's the question. Or do we do an elbow bump? We've been quarantined. We've been self-isolated. We have a whole new lexicon. We've got PPE, right? Yeah. WFH, work from home. I mean, okay. But our mental health is in the worst shape that we really have ever seen. And I do believe that the role of fear has been great in people's lives, and people postpone having medical checkups and good, appropriate preventative care that wasn't done. And there's people who, I mean, it's hard to say, but developed disease and cancer, and it wasn't caught early. And so the whole anxiety will paralyze you, does have a physiological effect when it's chronic on the body. And I believe it's important that we look and go, okay, this can affect my physical well-being, affects all my relationships. That's why I put together the book, The Anxiety Reset, because if anything needs to be reset, it's our mental health and how to create, again, that sound mind. All right, well, how you doing on your, I'm going to reach for mine. How you doing on your water? Water. So let me just add, today, the one thing to do is drink your liter of water by 2 p.m. if you can. If it's too late, just drink it. Water has a positive effect on our concentration, our mood, our blood pressure, and it's a foundational issue to get enough water in, because it's going to ultimately be calming, and you'll probably drink less other things. Like the guy that, I think he was saying that some days he'd hit about 15 cups of coffee a day. Yeah, he goes, I work from home, WFH, and I also drink my coffee all day long. So he didn't drink any water. Will that help your mental health and well-being? Absolutely not. So the other thing, to exercise. So you're gonna jump on the water, but over the next 30 days, I want you to see yourself as courageous. Oh, I know anxiety robs that sense and that feeling. But every day, practice 20 seconds of something courageous. It may be going out for a walk. It may be adding a mile. Well, if you can do a mile in 20 seconds, but adding. Think about, I say 20 seconds because it just takes that amount of time to decide something and do it and reach out to somebody, but be of service, be out of our own selves. That self-absorption increases the anxiety. So, okay, today I'm going to practice my 20 seconds of courageous behavior, whatever that may be. Drink my water, be courageous. I'm going to start building. I know I'm suffering from anxiety, but I'm going to start building a plan that creates a sound mind. And yes, we can have a sound mind. And will it take some time? Absolutely. Are there times where I need to go outside of myself and get help? Absolutely. Is there times where my body is so struggling that I may need to look at options to help me function, medications, and maybe I need to look at going somewhere and getting help? Absolutely. The important piece is I'm going to keep making decisions every day that are going to add up and bring me towards what we're calling a sound mind. And I do want to say there's hope. And that's why I say I'm passionate, more so than ever, as I've shared, because I see lives changed for good, and I see healing from anxiety